So hi, I'm Tom Shepard. I'm here to interview Bob Gronko. Bob is a retired worker with the Veterans Administration. He's been retired now for 4 years, and he's been doing a lot of traveling, and his other main hobby is beer brewing. So Bob's a big home brewer, and we're going to learn a little bit about it from him. We're in Blue Island, Illinois, and Acie Cargill is doing the taping here tonight. So Bob, tell us just a little bit about what you like to do and what your beer is like and so forth.
Well, I like to brew beers that I like to drink, and a lot of that is dark beers mostly, but I do brew one that's a recipe that was given to me by a friend who was actually taught me how to brew, and it's a honey beer that doesn't have any malt or barley or wheat or anything like that in it, so it's not dark at all. It's more like a champagne, sort of it's like a light mead. It's just a honey beer. So it's honey, hops, and ginger, and yeast, and water is really all that is in that beer.
What's the alcohol content, something like that?
You know, I have never really measured the alcohol content in my beers, although I think that honey beer is a little bit stronger than some of the other beers that I brew.
How do you regulate that alcohol content? I always wonder.
Basically by how much malt you're putting in your beer, which would be converted into sugar, which winds up getting converted into alcohol by the yeast. So pretty much it's by the amount of malt or sugars that you're converting into alcohol.
What's the Key West thing? Because I see it on your emails and your Facebook and all that stuff. What's Key West?
Well, Key West Homebrew is our homebrew supply shop down in Key West, where we sell homebrew supplies for homebrewers down there, basically.
Oh, okay.
So we're online, but pretty much our audience is really in the Keys.
And you go down there pretty regularly?
Yeah. Yeah, pretty much 2 or 3 times a year, at least. We spend the winters there usually, mostly.
Jimmy Buffett sample your beer yet?
I don't know about that. Probably not.
So is that your favorite one, that honey beer? Is that your favorite one then?
It's one of my favorites. It's actually Anna's favorite because it's gluten-free, and so she can drink it. So there's no gluten in it because there's no malt involved. There's no barley or wheat in it at all. So yeah, that's one of my favorites. The others are the stouts, and probably the chocolate wheat is another one of my favorites.
The chocolate added, or it's got a flavor?
Chocolate malt. It's just the chocolate malt is a designation of barley that's been heated to a certain degree in a certain amount of time, so that it sort of tastes like chocolate. And it has a very good chocolate taste, actually. So that's what's used in it to give it that chocolate flavor.
And where are you set up? In the basement here, or in your living room, or outside of the house, or where do you do this?
I have all my supplies in the basement, but I do my cooking and my brewing in the kitchen, right on the kitchen stove.
Wow, pretty interesting. Okay. Well, we want to thank you for doing this interview and telling us about your hobby and about your beer. And thank you very much, Bob.
Cheers, Tom!
Thanks for having us over tonight.
No problem.
I want to know what the hops are for.
The hops are preservative. So hops were introduced, I'm not sure, like the 15th or 16th century, somewhere in there. They were introduced into beer as a preservative, So before that, what was used was other herbs like yarrow and other different things. So hops are now pretty much the only thing that's used. Well, traditionally, I shouldn't even say traditionally, because traditionally, you know, hops weren't used. But anyway, what's used now is hops to preserve beer, and that's what it's used for, is bittering and for preservation of the beer.
Well, what is the hops? Is it a
Hops is a vine, and it grows up to like 20 to 30 feet tall. If given that kind of environment, it will grow that tall. And I have some right out here. I could show you a little bit later. But
That you're growing, or just you have some?
and they're ripening right now. Actually, I'm going to probably harvest them in maybe 3 or 4 weeks. Probably in October I'll harvest them. But anyway, they're growing now, and they get harvested. The cones get harvested, and those get dried out. On what I do is I put them on. I spread them out on a screen up in the attic, and they dry out for 2 or 3 or 4 weeks, whatever it takes, and depending on the humidity and so on and so on. So then when those dry, then what I do is I put them in what are those called? Those sucker bags, you know, where you suck the air out of them and store them for freezing, and then I freeze them. So my hops are frozen pretty much right after they're dried, and that's what I use for all the brewing that I do, is my hops that are growing right out there.
you use all your own?
Yes.
Oh. So what are the main ingredients?
The main ingredients would be, for most beers, are barley, sometimes wheat, and then a lot of people will also add some corn, sometimes some rice, but traditionally it would be also the hops and yeast and water, you know, and you'll get some other odd ingredients to add flavors to beer, but that's the basics.
And what makes a darker beer and a lighter beer?
Well, it's the malting process. So barley, it's usually barley that is malted, although wheat is malted also. But barley gets malted, and what that means when it gets malted is that it gets baked, and it's baked at different temperatures and for different amounts of time to get different flavors out of it. So if you heat some barley at 400 degrees for a half an hour, you're going to get a certain flavor. If you heat it at 200 degrees for 2 hours, it's going to come out differently. So there's a wide range of those different times and heat ranges that come out with a wide range of flavors. So some are chocolate and these roasted flavors and caramel, and there's just a range of different flavors that you get out of the way that that it's roasted.
And so that's where your experience comes in, because you kind of know what kind of a flavor you're going to get by certain techniques.
Well, sort of. I mean, I don't do any roasting myself. I'll get into that.
Go ahead.
Oh, so where was I? Oh, so if you wanted to talk about gallon batches, if you want to make a 5-gallon batches is the traditional 5-gallon carboy is the Hinckley and Schmidt water jug. Is a lot of homebrew recipes are for 5-gallon batches. Now you get 6-gallon and 6.5-gallon carboys, which is a little bit bigger, so you get a little bit bigger batch, which is nice. So instead of 2 cases of bottles of 12-ounce bottles of beer, you can get 3 cases of 12-ounce bottles of beer, a little bit more, somewhere in there. Anyway, but if you wanted to experiment, you know, if you weren't sure how this was going to turn out, you could easily make a batch of beer in, you know, a 1-gallon Gallo wine jug. You know, you get a wine jug, and as long as you can put a cork on it, basically, and an airlock, you can make a small batch that you can experiment with, which brewers do. You know, that the major brewers now are, you know, experimenting with 5-gallon batches and 10-gallon batches because, you know, they have that capacity. But you know, for our little schmoes, we could experiment with little 1-gallon batches. You know, I experiment with each batch that I make. It is an experiment. So that's
what are some of the things you change in when you're experimenting? A little extra barley or a little?
Yeah, well, so yeah, I might use a different yeast. I might add some more hops or a different kind of hops, or different barleys. You know, there's such a wide range of flavors in malts that are heated to different degrees, as I explained earlier. So you can get different malts and different flavors out of malts. So you have such a variety to choose from to choose your own recipe.
Could you explain once more what malt means? What is a malt?
A malt is basically if we start with barley, you take that seed, the barley seeds, and you take and heat it at a certain temperature for a certain amount of time, you get a malted barley. That's pretty much it.
That means barley that's heated.
Now Now you can get malted extract and, you know, make it into a liquid form, or you can dry it and get dried malt extract. But malt is heated. Well, it's actually, what they do is they put the barley seeds in water and let it actually germinate, and then kill that germination, and then so then you get to, so you'll be able to get that sugar out of it that you want to be able to.
So that's another
ferment.
factor that you didn't mention before, is germination.
Yes, I missed that. Yes.
Well,
so,
how's that work?
So, well, you're taking the seeds, germinating them, and then basically cooling it so that you can so you kill that so you kill the plant, you kill the germination, and then you're heating it to whatever malt flavor you want.
So the germination is an important step in this. For always?
Yes, it's critical. Yeah,
Huh.
It's important, right?
Well, thank you very much. We got Tom Shepard right here.
Thank
Got
you,
a few
Bob.
words to say, Tom?
No, I learned a lot just in the past 10-15 minutes here.
Cheers!
Bob Gronko. Right?
Nostrovia.
So I buy grains, which are malted, and so they're malted in a variety of different flavors. So I buy grains. I buy liquid malt extract, which is the grains that are reduced to liquid at different flavors, although you get a reduced amount of flavors when you get down to liquid. But anyway, and then I also buy dried malt extract, which is basically that malt extract that's been dried. So you get these things because they're a little bit easier to use, whatever. So that's why there's different varieties of use of malt.
Okay, so what do you do with that extract? What's the next step?
With if I was brewing with liquid malt extract, I would pour it right into some water, heat that up to boiling, add some hops, boil that up, and basically let that boil for a little while. Stop it, cool it down, add some yeast when it's at pretty much room temperature. Add the yeast, let it sit in a fermenter, and it can sit for a couple weeks to a couple months, depending on the beer, depending on how long it needs to ferment. And then put it into bottles or kegs. And if you put it into kegs, it's pretty much ready to drink. Then, if you put it into bottles, it kind of needs another couple weeks or a month or no for another secondary fermentation.
How do you cap your bottles or kegs?
I have a little capper with regular caps.
Oh.
It's a little handheld capper.
So is that heated before you cap it, or do you just?
Excuse me?
Is it cold when you cap the beer, or do you have to, like canning? Do you have to heat it up?
No. When I bottle the beer, it's room temperature.
Room temp.
I'm bottling it from when I determine that it's pretty much stopped fermenting in the primary fermenter. I actually transfer it to a bucket to add some more sugar so it can ferment again in the bottle. So it's so then you consider the bottle the secondary fermenter. So it ferments again in the bottle, so that when you crack that seal, when you open the bottle, it should fizz. You should hear that opening. That means it's been fermenting, and there's carbon dioxide escaping, which means it's alive. Got a good beer.
And I want to mention also that I drank some of that honey beer tonight. It was delicious. I survived, and it was great. Did you try any?
No, I didn't.
Try some next time.
I'll take a sip or two.
All right.
Thanks, Bob.
Okay.